On this episode of the Live Life, we're talking about the Barco E2 and the techs, specs, and more on the Live Life.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Infocom International. Infocom 2017. What will you create? Join them June 14th through the 16th in Orlando, Florida. Visit infocomshow.org for more information.
This is the Live Life, episode 26, E2, part 1.
This is the Live Life.
So welcome to the Live Life, where we bring you influential people and topics related to the selling, planning, designing, and producing and delivering live events. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the specs, the tech, and best practices of using the Barco E2. And joining me for that discussion is Tyler Mayne, CEO of Evolve Media Group. So how you doing, Tyler?
Good, Wallace. Greetings from Orlando.
Greetings. So Tyler, tell us a little bit about your background in terms of how you got involved in the AV industry and what made you start Evolve.
So I was kind of born into the AV industry. You know, when I was a kid, I was born in the 70s, late 70s. So we used to have like the big stereo components and that sort of thing. So when I go over to like my parents' friend's house, I could always judge how cool they were by how big a stereo system they had. I would always play around with it, rewire it, kind of piss off the guy who owns it. But my dad would always be like, he's fine. He knows what he's doing. I was like 4 years old. So I was kind of always into AV. In like 1992, if you remember, Wayne's World used to be on Saturday Night Live, and they introduced me to what public access television was. And before that, it was the channels I skipped over before MTV. So I didn't really know what the local government and local public access stations were. Saw that, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. So called up the local station. My mom drove me there, got a tour, and I spent probably the next 4 or 5 years of my life at that place and never left. I got a job while I was in high school at a local AV company called City Animation, and I think I was 17 years old, and started working there as their QC guy. And up to that point, I always wanted to be in production. I always wanted to be an editor, and they had a brand new Avid system. So I was used to 3/4-inch machines at the public access station. This was nonlinear, so it kind of blew my mind. But one day they needed someone to help out on a show, so I volunteered. I went out, and I was the house light operator. And as menial as that was, I fell in love with it. And to me, it was more exciting than sitting in a cold room digitizing tapes all day. And ever since then, I've been 100% into this business.
Very cool. House light operator. That I think you're the first.
That was the first job, house light operator, with the headset on, and when the video roll would go, I'd hit house to black.
That's right. Go black. Very cool. So what made you start Evolve Media Group?
So after Michigan, I moved to Florida. Again, started working in a warehouse at the bottom. I became a freelancer, or actually I took a full-time job or two in the industry, worked my way up. I decided to go freelance. And after doing that for 5 or 6 years, I kind of started seeing like the path as I got older. I kind of felt like it needed to change, and I needed to kind of prepare for it. And also, I always kind of wanted to own gear. And during that time, it was kind of a transitional point. So we had like 9/11 that happened. That was kind of a gut punch to the AV industry. Then we had the housing crisis. That was kind of a gut punch to the AV industry. So there was kind of this renaissance, or that's when kind of the whole rental model started to really take off, because people didn't want to risk spending so much money on large assets or expensive assets, and banks didn't really want to lend money. And I thought, looking at the rental model, I felt like, not that it wasn't being done right, but I felt like maybe I could do better and kind of do a company create a company that was focused solely on video and kind of take a little bit of a different kind of niche approach. And that's what Evolve Media is.
No, that's awesome. And, where we met back in my day on the live event side was more so, in the video world, as you said, particularly working with Barco products. And, you guys do a number of great things with video overall, but, you seem to have a special team with you as supporting the Barco element of it.
Yes.
So with today's topic in the E2, you like I said, you got a great team behind you. How many units do you guys own?
So, like I said earlier, our model here is a little bit different. We do a lot of sales and we do a lot of rental. So the amount of physical E2s that we've taken is approaching 50 units. The amount that we have in physical inventory is always floating. A few weeks ago, it was 1. Now it's back up to 6.
Right.
It's an extremely hot seller and it's extremely hot rental product. So we, our initial investment in E2 was 20 units off the bat. And I kind of took that leap of faith because, when I was a freelancer, my primary responsibility was being the Encore operator. And as much as I love the Encore, and it's a fantastic product because it's basically infinitely scalable, I kind of always looked over the fence at the Spider guys, and I was like, man, that looks a lot easier. Like one box, and you're kind of one and done. So when I saw the E2 coming out, not only did I think that there was going to be like a pent-up demand for this unit, but also you have all these potential owner-operators that are Encore people that can't own it because the unit's so big and so expensive that, I knew that there was going to be a demand, and the demand was there immediately, and it hasn't slowed down since.
No, that's fantastic. As far as support of that unit, you said your volume's up and down, you got people renting, you said you're selling them, you're leasing them. What level of support do you play when it comes to, say, a client project? Do you help with the design process? Is it strictly a drive rental, but the design of your rack from an engineering standpoint? What level of support does Evolve give to its clients?
So we're dry hire, but we're kind of like dry hire with a twist. So our sweet spot is wholesale video department for rent. So what we want to do essentially is our goal is to create the best video department in the world and make it open source and make it non-competitive so other staging companies can access that to any level that they need. So that could range from just consulting with us to, hey, we have a huge projection mapping project. We need a bunch of E2s. We need your help before, during, and after the event. And when we're engaged in that way, we are representing the company. So the staging company, that is, not producers, not end clients. So our goal is to make sure that our customer's customer has no idea who we are. So we want to really make the stager better and help improve what they do.
That's fantastic. Now, you said you were an engineer coming up in the industry. What advice would you have for up and coming engineers who are, trying to break through or kind of like feel like they're at a mid-level and they're looking at the Spider shows and looking at these E2 shows and these bigger projects and saying, I want to get to that point. What advice would you give to them?
Well, first of all, you have to be passionate about this industry, and you know very quickly whether you can cut it or not. So if you're used to being off on the weekends or getting off at 5 o'clock at night, this isn't really the industry for you. That's number one. That's what I thrived on is, I want to make as much overtime as I possibly can make. I loved it. But you have to have the passion on top of that. So, it's very important for a up and comer in this industry, if they want to get into it, start at the bottom, start sweeping the floors in the warehouse, start figuring out a way to load in and do load outs. Those are positions that are, shows need 20, 30 people and they're hungry for hands, and ask a lot of questions, shadow the video guys, see what they do. And then the interesting thing about video is there's so many different things that you can do within video, from being a camera op to a projectionist to an E2 op, and all sorts of different positions. It's kind of good to kind of look at them, try them out, and then see which one you're passionate about. What I would probably recommend, and something that I tended to do a little bit when I was a freelancer too much, is I wanted to learn everything. If I could do it over again, I would kind of focus on one or two trades. That being said, one thing that I always tell people, let's say with the E2, is it's made things so easy that don't think that you can just take a class and be an E2 and then consider yourself a V1. to me, a V1 is someone that is running the E2, but they have to me, a good V1 should be able to go into any position on that show. And maybe they're not the best handheld operator or the best projectionist or the best playback operator, but they can do it. And if something goes wrong, they can get in there and troubleshoot it and fix it. And I think that's one thing that's kind of changed with some of these technologies making things so easy is someone will say, oh, I learned the E2 or I learned this new platform. Now I'm a video engineer. No, you're not. It takes years of experience to really get in that hot seat. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I would say my advice to someone that's young, start at the bottom, ask a lot of questions, and eventually and very quickly you'll rise up, and also focus on a talent.
No, that is great advice. You've done this for a long time, and like I said, you've started a company that's continuing on with the work in the industry. What is it that you love about it?
It's the same. It's different every single day. Even if even when I was a freelancer, if you're sitting in the most boring show that you've ever done, those sometimes tend to be the ones that are the most exciting. Meaning you're sitting there, you're bored, you're waiting for the show to end, and your projector just went out, and you need to fix it. So it's kind of like to me, it's like being a pilot. It's a lot of moments of boredom with what is it? Lots of moments of boredom filled with seconds of sheer terror. That's kind of what it is to be a tech. Is you're sitting backstage, everything's going fine, and all the power just went out, and you have 5 minutes to fix it because doors are about to open.
Not scary at all.
So but that's the thing is a lot of people get out of this industry and it's almost like you're coming back from war. Is you in a way, like we all kind of like that. We like that stress and we kind of thrive on it. And then when we're out of it, we end up missing it and wanting to get back in. And that's why I see a lot of people don't leave this industry. And if they do, they end up coming back.
Yeah, I've never seen anybody actually retire. They just do less work.
Godfather, you can, every time I leave, they try to pull me back in or something like that. Like, okay, I'm glad you got a new job, but I'll see you in a year. You'll be back.
That's right. Cool. Well, let's get into the main topic where we go a little deeper in the E2. So it's been out a few years now. And it's been a while, I think since I've seen a product like just rapidly get adopted and so many people be excited about it. What was it that made this product such a welcoming response to the live event industry?
Well, it was something that was needed. So, again, before the predecessor of the E2 was the Barco Encore. You also had some competing products like the Spider X20 out there. The Spider, to me, is a little bit of a precursor to the E2, but the E2 came out when it dropped. It was, something like 28 inputs, 8 outputs minimum. I think it's up to 32 inputs actually. Lots of scaling potential, expandable, easy to use. It just kind of hit on all the right notes. And, we were heavy into Encore before the E2 came out. And, I was criticized by some of the staff here because I immediately, when I saw the E2, I immediately made the decision to sell off all of our Encore stuff. And the argument was, well, we're getting calls for Encore all the time. Why would we want to sell it? And, you have to, as a business owner, especially in this industry, you have to weigh in your mind potential rentals in the future versus value, meaning that a lot of things drop off a cliff value-wise when something comes out that, makes it seem antiquated. So all of our original Barco Encore stuff sold off right away, which gave us more money to buy more E2s. And then, the first time I kind of used it, I came in here on the weekend and within, an hour I had it set up, and that was with really, having no idea how it works. So I kind of knew that once the technicians started using this thing, it's the only thing that they would want on show site. And that's proven to be true. It's a dream to use. It's easy to set up. It's extremely reliable. I don't want to sound too promotional for the E2, but we've just had so much good luck with it. In 2.5 years, we've never had a failure. We've had 2 E2s that have returned off rentals, almost completely destroyed due to some really bad shipping. And they fire up, they work great. We send them back to Barco for cosmetic repairs. But the thing I always say about the E2 is it's not the sexiest product in the world, but it's basically a tank, and you can't break a tank, and you can count on it every day, day in and day out. And when you're a technician, ultimately you want to sit behind the gear and feel relaxed. You don't want to have to worry about something flaking out or you having to reboot it, because that makes you look bad as well. And the E2 is a product that, from what I see, is something that you set up, you get out of it gets out of your way, and you can move on to other things. Where with the older platform like the Encore, some of these larger systems would take all day to set up and program and troubleshoot. So that was all that you could do. With the E2, it sets up in a matter of an hour, and then you can move on to something else.
No. How close to the E2, like I said, you went in the warehouse on the weekend, set up in an hour. Is it an easy transition from those that were Encore users?
It's completely different, so you have to think a little bit differently. There's really nothing. I mean, Barco pretty much started over with this product, but once you go through the training, it's very easy to set it up and operate it.
There's a number of different models I've seen out there now. So you got the E2, I think the S3, and then I think there's some in the middle or below that. How many iterations of this unit are out there now that's part of what I'll call the E2 family?
So Barco calls it the Event Master family. So that consists currently of the E2 Junior, which is basically an E2 cut in half. You have the S3, and then you have the S3 Junior. And then you have a new product called the EX, which is a single rack unit processor. I actually have one right here. I have a prop for you, Wallace. You want to see
awesome.
EX? Look at this.
First prop.
This is exciting. It just came out. This is the EX. And this is something that people in our industry have been asking for a while. So the E2 makes things very easy. But what you can use this box for is if you run out of inputs and outputs, on the back of it, you basically can put, I don't know if you can see this all right.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Put two cards in this thing, and they could be input cards, they could be output cards, or they could be a mix. So it's an expansion chassis. The E2 has a lot of ins and outs, so you might not necessarily need this. But I was just talking to a tech this morning that's using this right now, and he has this on his graphics station, and he has a ton of computers. So he's got 8 computers going into this and 1 link cable that goes to the E2. This could also be your stage box for, sends and receives, going to DSM, sending computers back. This could go to front of house. This hooks up to the S3. This hooks up to the E2. And you can also connect multiple of these units. So you could put one at graphics backstage, one at front of house, one on the stage. So what I love about the Event Master platform is they keep making it better. And they keep adding new things to it. And I think what Barco does really well is, let me put this thing down. It is a little bit heavy, by the way. What Barco does really well is they listen to their customers. So this has been something that people have been asking for, and they listen to those things, and they're like, okay, that sounds like a good idea. We'll go ahead and build it. So the EX is an inexpensive solution, but that's the latest product. So basically, you have 4 products. Then you have the EX, and then currently there's 2 controllers available, the EC200 and the EC50. And of course, you can always control the E2 with your laptop.
Cool. Now, starting with
for show and tell.
So sticking with the E2 as the larger box of the family, what type of inputs and outputs in terms of number of inputs and outputs does that box carry?
So the E2 that's the nice thing about the E2 is it's completely card based. So there is a standard configuration that Barco comes out with, and off the top of my head, I think it's every bank is 4 inputs. So it's 2 banks of SDI, 2 banks of DVI, 4 banks of a combo card, which is HDMI and DisplayPort, and then 4 or 5 of those. And then it has some output cards, some SDI and HDMI output cards. So at the maximum, I believe it's 32 inputs and 12 outputs. 8 of those outputs are fully mixable, and then you have some auxes on top of that. If that's not enough, you can daisy chain another E2. There's these fiber cables that connect it, and then they basically share the resources back and forth. And from what Barco's telling me is they're working on software to allow you to connect even more E2s. In today's world, do you really need more than 2 E2s? Not really. But once we go into 4K, what's going to happen is those cards that have 4 inputs on them, once you send a 4K native signal into it, now you go down to 1 input. So it cuts your processing power way down. So if you're doing an all 4K show, you could conceivably need 2, 3, 4 E2s, which is what Barco, would want us all to have anyway. So
Got it. Now, would you still need those with the new IO expansion box? Or could you
I'm sorry?
So would you still need those with the new IO expansion box? Or
I mean, to me, the nice thing about the IO extension, I mean, it depends on the show. The nice thing about the IO extension box is it's really inexpensive and it doesn't come with cards. So if you have cards, you can just add them. And if not, the cards are pretty affordable as well.
Got it.
We kind of look at the EX as a workbox item.
Yeah.
Something like if you're a stager, you should just have an EX on every show that has an E2 as just an, oh, by the way, because you might need it.
Yeah.
So it's a problem solver. It's like the Image Pro. It's a problem solver.
With the makeup of the E2 and its flexibility of the ins and outs, back with the Encore, you had to have your routers and things like that. Do you really need, a router element with the E2 now?
So let me just say this. I was at a Barco meeting last week, and they officially announced that they're discontinuing their routers. If that kind of says anything, it's not that routers aren't needed. They are in certain shows and certain scenarios. But we used to make a lot of money here doing renting Avitech multi-viewers and routers, and that business has really kind of dropped off. I mean, we still rent the large routers, like a 32 by 32 or a 64 by 64. But a lot of the rental back then was driven by Encore systems, and now that's not even needed. So everything in video is getting smaller. That's a whole other topic, but it's just everything's just getting smaller, faster, cheaper, and easier.
No, it definitely is. Definitely is. As far as control surfaces, you said it has two, a physical controller, and then you can use a laptop as well. Have you seen any preferences from, live event companies calling you from a rental standpoint, or if they're using the physical controller or just running it off their laptop?
It depends on the show. I mean, really, at the end of the day, you can do everything on the laptop, with the Event Master software. The only problem with that is it can be a little bit cumbersome if you have a lot of presets, or you have a producer or show caller on comm that's constantly wanting you to build presets quickly and recall them. There's a lot of poking around. So what we've seen is most companies purchase the EC50 because it's inexpensive. I think it's like a $12,000 list price on the EC50. And then, so that solves a lot of the problems. At the end of the day, you have at least some sort of a touch surface that you can quickly recall and program presets. Then you go up to the big EC200, which is a self-contained unit. So the EC50, you still need to plug a laptop into it, and then it becomes kind of an extension of the laptop. With the EC200, however, that's completely integrated. So the software, computer, everything is inside, so you can run a whole show on that. That's a big controller. It's somewhat on the expensive side. There's a lot of them out there in the marketplace, but the EC50 seems to be the sweet spot. But I really like the EC200 controller, just because I will say that the downside about the way technology is changing is, back when I was doing this, you had huge beta decks and huge Encore racks, and Video Village looked really impressive. Mm-hmm. Expensive, and you can charge for extra for impressive and expensive. If a client walks backstage and all they see is laptops, and everything's kind of on the ground, what is there value? Like, it doesn't look like there's a lot of value back there. So I feel at least the EC200 makes it seem like there's something going on versus a bunch of guys on the laptops backstage.
So we should keep our old racks, just roll them in, power them up, let the lights twinkle, and
don't get rid of the old racks. Don't get rid of the old racks. You can charge for those.
There you go. So what about iPad controls? So I carry an iPad Pro, 12.9 inches, so it's like the size of my MacBook Pro monitor. And I'm not a buttons guy. So is there an iPad control element to the E2?
I'm not 100% sure on the Barco side. There is a company called, I believe it's AVP. They make the Dominion controller. They also make a version. They make a software program that runs on your iPad as well, and it doesn't really allow you to program the E2. But what's cool about that is you can take your iPad and, let's say, sit down at front of house with the show caller, or sit in the audience with the producer, and you can fire off the presets right next to them. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah, that's a nice element. Very nice element. As far as the initial setup, hey, before, back in the day, plug in the VGA cable first, make sure you're all good, then fire up your computer. Is there anything that from a best practices standpoint, when you first fire up your E2, you should do to initially get set up your show?
I mean, the E2 makes it very simple. What I would recommend is, go to the back of it and inspect it. Make sure that all the ports look good. Like I said, it's all card based, so I would go and make sure that all the cards are screwed in tight. Just give it kind of a good once over, and then from there you're in pretty good shape. Always do a factory default. That's the other thing that's important. Do a factory default and make sure that the unit is on the latest software version. I mean, we're pretty good about that, but not a lot of people are. Some people forget, and then it's behind too many versions, and maybe Barco fixed a big problem. So those are the things that I would check. As far as connectivity goes, you don't have. I mean, you can just plug and go, and it's nice because it has little green lights behind every input, so you can see instantly if you have signal there or not.
Very nice. One thing I've noticed with the E2 compared to other products out there, engineers seem very comfortable running cameras through the system. Have you seen that as a best practice, and why is that compared to some other systems out there that engineers feel comfortable just shooting cameras through now?
I don't. It's something I really despise, and the reason why is the tail end of my career and as a freelancer. If you remember, there was an FSN, the product from Barco called an FSN.
Yeah,
and FSN was a wonderful product. We still have them. I think it's one of the best switchers ever made. But they basically married image processing with a production switcher, which was kind of groundbreaking at the time. The only downside to that product is you'd show up on show site and the company that you're working for would say, oh, by the way, it's 3 cameras and you have all these presets and all the you're basically maxing out your FSN. And the problem with that is if I'm trying to call cameras and listen to someone call the show at the same time, I can't do it. At least for me, I can't physically do it because you're kind of using both sides of your brain. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to tell the camera people what to do while someone else on the other end is trying to tell me what to do. So I think it's very stressful for the operator. And I think at the end of the day, it can cause a train wreck on show site. That being said, the E2 is really good at switching cameras. You can even kind of switch them, do cuts on the controller. It's very fast, so it makes it easy to control cameras. But I'm a firm believer that the person running the E2 should not be cutting cameras. Now, if it's one camera, that's fine. If it's 2 cameras and the second one is locked down, okay, that's fine too. But if we're getting into a real show, then at least have a small production switcher. I mean, you can even bring in a Blackmagic with a Mac laptop and put someone else in that seat that can switch the cameras.
No, makes total sense and good advice. So you talked about not having a unit crash yet on show. Have you? I can't believe you said that out loud.
Yeah, they're crashing all over the world as we speak.
I was going to say, so have you heard stories of other folks being in the field where they've had a unit go down?
I haven't really heard of anything that was a mortal failure. I know that there were a few little bugs at the beginning. I think what Barco did really smart with the E2 is they really scaled it back when they release it. So, and I see other manufacturers doing this too, and I think it's smart. So instead of saying this is what the box can do and everything is working, they say, well, we're only going to push out the essential features, and here's a list of what we're going to be releasing in the next few years. So the E2 is probably halfway through its product cycle as far as adding more features. There's some stuff on the horizon that's really cool that they're working on. But I think the conservative approach is a lot better, because what ultimately happens is if you're a technician, you go out with the E2, it crashes on your first show, the second show it glitches, you're not going to want to be in front of that piece of gear for a long time. It's like you're literally getting burned. So it's give me an encore, give me something else. This thing's not ready. So if you do that, it's going to burn a lot of bridges. And like I said earlier, ultimately what a manufacturer wants, what we want at Evolve, like our end goal is a technician sitting in front of the gear relaxed, because if he is or she is, they can focus on the show and not the technology.
What are some scenarios you would recommend having 2 E2s in line? I don't see it a lot, but obviously there's some opportunity to where it probably should be. What are those opportunities where you see that it should be 2 in line?
I mean, maybe if you have a show that's really mission critical, like if you're doing an auto show or something that or a big award show where it can't go wrong, and if it does, there's no time to troubleshoot it. You could potentially put together a system of, let's say, 2 to offer you some sort of redundancy. At that point, you do need to put routers ahead of it because you want redundancy. So if one fails, power supply dies or something like that, you want to make sure that your failure points are not the unit that just went down, or your failure point is that unit. So I'd say mission critical, primary and backup E2, not necessary from what I've seen, but it is an option. If you're doing a really large show, you'll need it. If you're doing a 4K show, you might need it. If you have a lot of sources somewhere else, say you just have a ton of inputs coming from the stage, you could run a fiber cable from E2 to E2 and have a whole heck of a lot of connectivity.
Hey, it's your host Wallace here. We had to cut the interview short as the conversation extended way beyond our half-hour show length. Part 2 the conversation will pick up with training, how to select a good operator, and 4K with the E2. In the interim, if you have any further questions on the E2 or related topics, drop me a line on Twitter at WallaceCTS or in the comment section of this post online at AVNation.tv. Very good, Tyler. Thank you so much for all the details about the E2 today and learning more about Evolve. Where can folks find you online via social networks, web? Any details there?
We're on the Facebooks, the Googles, so evolvemediagroup.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, everything. And we try to be hip and social. So
are you on the Twitter?
I'm on the Twitters, the Googles, and the Facebooks. Yeah.
Have you reached the gram?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, no, we'll put that detail in the show notes. And again, thank you so much for talking about the text, the specs, and best practices of the E2.
Thank you. It's good chatting with you.
Good chatting with you, man. And I'll be bringing you back to talk more about the academy and training in the industry. So that will be a 2-part episode for sure.
We need to talk about laser projection. That's the one I want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
That might be a 2-parter.
I am working on that one. I have heard many magical and mystical, informative details regarding laser.
Yeah. Okay.
That may be an Infocom Brews and Laser show.
It's going to be a laser show. Lots of lasers in Infocom.
Yes, indeed.
So wear your sunglasses.
For only 20,000 hours.
Exactly.
Start your watches now.
Thanks, Wallace. Good chatting with you.
All right, Tyler.